And I'm going to go ahead. I'm resuming the recording. So we are now being recorded.
Okay.
Um,
How long did you want to give everybody?
let's give them 5 minutes.
Okay, cool.
Because we have about people are coming in. We have
Mhm.
about 21, and I think we've had almost 3 times that many students register, and all kinds of things happen at the last minute. You know, people have trouble getting in sometimes, and
Yeah, we did.
yeah, we did it though. That's always terrible. I don't know about you, Teresa, but it terrifies me when that happens.
It doesn't terrify me. It's just more like, okay, I know these things happen.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I'm gonna get me some water.
Okay. I always expect the worst, so I always think it's something bad. So, okay, as people are coming in, we're in the Amendments 101 presentation. We are waiting about 5 minutes for some folks to come in, so that people will get to see as much of it as we can. I'm Robert Woodrum, and I have Teresa Hardy with me from the NAACP. Okay. Thank you, JP. I think JP has to run to another meeting. He's usually got about a half a dozen meetings, I think, every day or something. So I ran into him yesterday up at Dunwoody, I think in between meetings. So, okay. All right, everybody, we are waiting for a few people to come in. I think we'll wait for 5 minutes and then we will begin our event as people are coming in. If you can locate the chat while we're doing our presentation, while Teresa is doing her presentation, if you have questions, if you put it in the chat, I will write down as many of them as I can. Usually people have pretty much the same questions, or at least many people do, and I'll take those down as they're coming in, and we'll ask them at the end. So we'll get some to talk about some of the issues you want to talk about as well. Okay, let's see how many folks we have now. We have up to about 36, 34 people, so that's good. I'm seeing a lot of my students. Thank you all for coming. All right, we'll wait about 2 more minutes.
Okay.
So you all just sit tight. Everyone, the chat is located in the bottom right hand, should be on the bottom right hand side of your screen. And if you have a question, you can just type it in there. I'm seeing a question about attendance. I will create an attendance roster at the end of this event. Hopefully, technology working, and I'll be able to send it to your professor. Be able to send it around for the extra credit. There's a question here about the video. No, you're not supposed to have your video on. Only me and Miss Hardy here have our videos on, so you're okay. I'm not exactly sure what that is for. Hopefully this link is working for you. Okay, JP is telling me to click the link to check in. But I should get an attendance roster as well through WebEx, and we should be good for that. Okay, I think it's 11:35. Teresa, we think we're ready to begin?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
on you.
Okay, so why don't you go ahead? Why don't you go ahead and share your screen?
Okay. All right, cool. 1 second. Mhm.
And I'll just say one more time that it looks like JP is saying to click that link to check in. And of course, I'm going to create an attendance roster at the end of this event as well for the professors who have students here. Okay, so let me begin. Okay, so the link is not working. They're saying so. Again, I will create an attendance roster at the end of this event to for the attendance. So we should be good on that. Okay, so we'll go ahead and begin. My name is Robert Woodrum, and I teach history at the Decatur campus of Perimeter College. I'd like to welcome everybody here today to our important discussion with Teresa Hardy, who is the president of the DeKalb branch of the NAACP. It's entitled Amendments 101, Revisiting Our Rights as African Americans. Our event is part of the Constitution Week activities at Georgia State. There are a whole lot of different events planned, from discussions of the changes to voting laws here in Georgia to the issue of immigration, and from redistricting of congressional and legislative seats to next year's midterm and statewide elections. I encourage everyone here to visit our Constitution Week website and learn more about these opportunities. Now it's my great honor to introduce our speaker. Teresa Hardy is a lifetime member of the DeKalb NAACP. She was born and raised in Lineville, Alabama. She attended the University of Alabama at Birmingham, where she received a Bachelor of Science degree in Management Information Systems and Human Resource Management. She is the proud parent of Jamarius Hardy, her son. Under her leadership, the NAACP here in DeKalb has been really active. The organization has been at the forefront of voter education and registration. It has recently started the DeKalb Remembrance Project to memorialize the victims of lynching in our county. It has organized commemorations during the Martin Luther King Jr. federal holiday and events celebrating the Emancipation Proclamation and Juneteenth. The NAACP has even been at the forefront of the response to the COVID-19 pandemic, organizing forums on health and safety during this exceptionally difficult time. So we are just so grateful that Ms. Hardy has come to Perimeter College virtually to talk to us about these and other important issues. And so I'm going to turn it over now to Teresa Hardy. And thank you for coming, Teresa.
Thank you for having me, Robert. I'm trying to make the screen full screen here. Can y'all see it full screen? Yes. Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Teresa Hardy. I'm the president of the NAACP DeKalb County Branch, and I am happy to be part of Constitution Week. I'm going to kind of take you from a perspective that's a little different just for Constitution Rights Week, but as well as what's going on where we come from, like some Constitution highlights. And then I want to take you through some of the things that we're doing with the NAACP. And then I want to leave you with a call to action. So, and before I begin in that, I want to just give you a brief overview of who NAACP DeKalb County is. Again, here's a brief agenda of how we're going to go through it. Mission and vision, our executive committee structure, our game changers, and then again, the things that I just discussed with you. Our mission for the NAACP is to ensure the political, educational, social, and economic equality of rights of all persons and to eliminate racial hatred and racial discrimination. I wanted to provide this mission statement to you because it's it amazes me that the NAACP was formed and has been here for 112 years. And this is after the Constitution was chartered, formed, passed. Um, and you would think that because we have a Constitution that is about we the people, that you wouldn't need an organization like the NAACP. So I wanted to kind of put things in a perspective where you understand the mission of the organization to the actual Constitution. Again, my name is Teresa Hardy, and I'm the branch president of the NAACP DeKalb. Here's a quote from me that I want you to take some time to even think about it, even in your daily lives. It is our time to change the hands of time intentionally. And I'll repeat that one more time. It is our time to change the hands of time intentionally. And as we go through this presentation today, you will see that that this quote here resonates with me because I'm considered a change agent. And there's a reason why I'm always into change. And I'm thinking about it more of 2021, that we have to do these things intentionally. Okay. Just a little bit about the structure of the executive committee. We have a president, 3 vice presidents, a secretary, assistant secretary, treasurer, assistant treasurer, 5 members at large, and 18 committees. The committee structure is where all the work is done. And then our leadership team is made to make sure that the office piece is done, as well as for the presidents and the vice presidents, we are the eyes, ears, and the representative for the NAACP, DeKalb County organization. A little about our game changers for 2021. With everything that's going on, we wanted to make sure that NAACP has a relevance to our community. And as we are an advocacy organization for the rights of all people. And what we did come together to come up with is an E3 game changers. E3 means educate. We want to educate our community, equip them with the right resources, and empower the community to change. And how is that going to be done? So in NAACP, we work on public policy. We work on economic sustainability issues. We provide education advocacy, also criminal justice reform, health advocacy, and youth engagement. And with this E3 game changers, I want you to understand that I'm an acronym person. So Peachy is what we came up with. Sorry, the A didn't fit well with us, but we always want to do acronyms that fit with people so people understand what the organization is and what is the organization doing. So we thrive in making sure that we do our E3 game changers through all of these, utilizing the 18 committees that the NAACP has. So with that, I'm going to go into our presentation today. And what I want us to really think about when we think about revisiting our constitutional rights as African Americans. And one connotation I want to kind of bring forth is when we think about the fact that African Americans is probably the only race of people that have been called everything but what they really are. And what we are Americans who have been brought here as slaves and then called different names to identify ourselves in a country that states that we are the people. And I state it that way because we now known as being African Americans, but you know that we've gone through the words of being the N word, the colored word, the black word, all of these different connotations to just tell folk who we are. And I think we are a great group of people, of being Black people. And you will see when we go through this presentation how powerful it is to be a Black person in the United States of America. And one key thing that I've always wanted us to make sure we have, I do have the pamphlet here, the Constitution. And if anyone wants a copy of the Constitution, I have plenty of them. I got them from our Congressman, Hank Johnson. He provided quite a few for me to share with people. It is important that we, in order to live in the United States, that we understand how we are governed. And in the Constitution of the United States, it says, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish the Constitution for the United States of America. And when we're talking about we the people, that's everybody. So when we're having to divide ourselves, when we have to divide ourselves, it always it concerns me, because we are the United States. And if you're the United States, we're supposed to be united. So when I thought about going through the revisiting of our constitutional rights for African Americans, I think about these highlights. One, Black people came into America and was noted as 3/5 of a person. So we didn't come here with a wholeness. We came here as 3/5 of a person. And then it wasn't until we had the 14th Amendment, and I'm not going to read all the amendments because you do that in your classroom. What I'm trying to give is a perspective here. 14th Amendment provided citizenship for Black people who had come over as slaves. The 15th Amendment provided that now that you're a citizen, you shall not be denied the right to vote. You shall not be denied the right to vote. I've always wondered why we couldn't just say you have the right to vote now that you're a citizen, but the 15th Amendment had to be passed for that. And then you give us the right to vote, and we still are unable to vote because of poll tax, literacy tests, and other things. So then there's the 24th Amendment that is also passed to prohibit us prohibit the use of having a poll tax. And I wanted us to stay right in here as a historical sketch, and then kind of take that to where we are here in 2021. And then one other highlight I wanted to provide, that even though you had all of these amendments, 14th Amendment, the 15th Amendment, and the 24th Amendment, we still had to come and have a Voting Rights Act passed in 1965. And with this Voting Rights Act being passed, it allowed for Black people's registration to go from 23% to 61%. And this is only who registered. This does not have, this is not the number for who actually started to vote. And just want to keep that in that context there. Okay, so let's go into some of the national events that come to mind when we're thinking about the Constitution and its impacts on African Americans. These events are really near and dear to me. As Robert noted, I'm from Alabama, so a lot of things happen in the South that I personally did not understand or didn't even know all the context until I got older. While I was in school, we did not hear about Bloody Sunday. We didn't hear the historical piece of really what was going on with Black people. The only notable Black person that we knew about was Dr. Martin Luther King. And the only thing that was in my history book it stated that he was a Nobel Peace Prize winner. It did not tell me what he had done for the people while he was living. It just said what he received. So in my growing up, I attended UAB. And when I went to UAB, it was my first instance of advocacy. Um, um, we had to take an elective, and my elective that came up was Western Civ. And with Western Civ, I don't know anything about Western Civ, so I went to say, why we can't do African American history? Well, if I take an African American history class, it will not be approved as an elective. I can take it, but I get no credit. So we, Apple Sweetheart, along with the Apples, we kind of put together a little protest to say that we wanted African American history to be an approved elective. So that was kind of my first instance of getting into advocacy work. One, you have to speak up when things don't seem right with you. And if I'm going to learn anything about any history, I should always learn about my history, which is Black history. This national event here, Bloody Sunday. Now, we've talked about the constitutional rights, giving us the rights to be a citizen, and then have the right to vote, and then not to even have the poll tax. But when I look at this event that actually happened, it amazes me of what I see, and it's more of angriness. It's the hatred, it's the racial discrimination. It's also keeping Black people for their due right. It's their right to go vote, but at the same time, you're going to beat me down. You're going to keep me from expressing myself freedom. And we're supposed to have the right to freedom of speech. So when I look at something like this event that happened in 1965, and the fact that 50 years later, we're still having the same event, I often wonder, what is this Constitution doing for Black people? And that's what I wanted to kind of just share with you on this perspective. And then we had something earlier, and I wanted to take us to 2000. I got a picture here of Stacey Abrams, not because she was running for governor, but the fact that she stood up and identified acts of voter suppression. And with her, the actual proposal of what she did in mobilizing everyone to actually get to the polls, and the fact that with that we had record numbers of people actually coming to the polls. Remember, we talked about the percentage of people got registered, and now we're talking about people got registered. The number increased drastically, but a majority of those people who registered actually voted in that election. But what came from that is what makes me more concerned about what the Constitution is doing to our Black people. Is we in the state of Georgia had a bill passed, SB 202, with all sorts of tactics. And these are more the institutionalized, systematic tactics that show that we're still not free today due to the Constitution. We're still having to fight for our rights for something as simple as going to vote. And then we also, and that's at the state level. And then we also have even though John Lewis was a congressman, someone who had been in office for a long time fighting for the good of the people, we're still, after his passing, and everybody was saying how they love Congressman Lewis, how they love what he stood for. But then when it comes to protecting the vote, we can't get past we can't pass an HR 1 and an HR 4 bill for the rights of the people, as well as making voting rights protecting our voting rights at the federal level so that we don't have what we're seeing to happen at the state level. Since the passing of John Lewis, and I like to put it in that context, I think it's 13 or 14 states have come up with different voting laws at the state level that will just diminish what Black people just proved in the previous election. If we're registered to vote, if we exercise our right to vote and register, then we will go out to vote. And with that, what we're finding is that is power. It is powerful. It's powerful in the stance that Black people took a stance to come out, exercise their right to vote according to the Constitution, and now there's states that's saying, wait a minute, something had to go wrong. We need to make some new laws. We need to change things because this should not be this way. They're saying that there's voter fraud, but there was no real evidence of voter fraud. All we saw was an edge for people to get out to vote, and it was an increase in the Black community, along with our other minority groups, to actually come out and exercise their right to vote. But it made everyone angry, kind of like what we saw here on Bloody Sunday. Okay. So I wanted to kind of give this context to kind of let you know that there's still things that we need to do as a people as it relates to the Constitution. I'm not sure if we need to change the actual Constitution, because every time there's been changes, there's been more disenfranchisement to people. There's still no equity amongst the people. We still have quality of life issues that stand with us today. So I'm not really sure, and that's what I'm going to ask you guys to help answer that question. And what do you think needs to happen with the Constitution? And as I go to the next slide, I'm going to talk about some of the things that NAACP is is doing as it relates to one part of what I like to reference is the slavery piece. Literally, this is the part that we got here, and then we were working for free, and then we were actually lynched for no reason, right? But then we have the Confederacy piece, and I just want to spend a little time on the Confederacy piece and then the lynching piece. These are two historical moments in our history, and depending on who you talk to, you have narratives of different people giving their different perspective. When we as Black people think about Confederacy, we think about the Ku Klux Klan. But when our daughters of Confederacy and the sons of Confederacy think about it, they think about it from a historical sketch. Now, remember that Civil War was really to keep us from being able to vote. So that's a whole nother perspective on why we feel some kind of way as it relates to the Confederacy. And they feel some kind of way about Confederacy. The United States offers us all freedom of speech and of your own opinion. But when it comes to what it really means to Black people, I'm feeling, by my observation, is that we always forget about the Black people. And it's kind of, why do we always push Black people down? And I'm gonna give you a quick synopsis of what I've experienced as a Black person. I've been a diversity lead for the consulting company that I work for. And in that consulting company, we had these different employee resource groups. We had to create these resource groups so that people could learn about each other. So remember, the resource groups really divide you so that you're in like minds, so that you can actually learn from each other. But we started out as minority groups. And I'm saying this because we went from being Black, and then there was minority groups. And when you create minority groups, you really remove Black people from the opportunities, because you still haven't given them the tools, the resources that is needed for Black communities to thrive. So when you do the minority piece, you got the Asian group, the Latin group, the Hispanic group, and now the white women group, the LGBT group, all of these other groups, and then the Black people still feel left out. And then when we was working through diversity and inclusion initiatives, those are the things that I kind of found out about just being in those employee resource groups. I saw them more of a divide than an inclusiveness. And then what we actually created was we needed to learn off of each other. And being a diversity lead, we actually start partnering, meaning when the Black African American group actually had their meetings and events, we invited the other groups so that they could learn from us. We have a culture just like everyone else, and people need to understand our culture instead of making Black people be like other people. And that's what I feel like that has happened in the actual United States of America, that Black people didn't know their roles, what they're supposed to be. So we then began to act like whatever we were around, just to be acknowledged and also accepted. So when I think about some of the things that we needed to do with the NAACP DeKalb, it was more of an educational piece for me. And I wanted to learn from it, but I also wanted us to be empowered by whatever we learn. So I've learned a lot as it relates to Confederacy. And as you know, in DeKalb County, we've removed a lot of the Confederacy markers and signs and things from DeKalb County. Now, from an NAACP perspective, we have our resolution was to remove any Confederacy monuments, names, street names, flags, all of that from public property. If it's on public property, that's tax money. And the way we look at that is we will not put our tax money on signs of hate. So that's why we kind of fight to remove the Confederacy from public places. So if you want Confederacy things, put it on your own property. That's the way we look at that. Now, when we got into the journey, and we called it a journey of remembrance and reconciliation, because what we learned is no one ever talked about lynching. They never talked about it, especially even in my family. And I knew that, when you start talking to Black people about lynching, we never talk about lynching. So there was a opportunity for healing. And that's where the DeKalb Remembers Project came from. It's more like the things we don't know, how do we learn it, heal from it, and do better from it? So like I said, the DeKalb Remembers Project was birthed from a trip to the museum and the park in Montgomery that is hosted by EJI, which is Equal Justice Initiative. So we took that bus trip unknowingly thinking what was going to happen after we took the bus trip. We had about 50 people on the bus, and we came back, and everyone was so excited, but they wanted to do something. The good thing is EJI offered the communities to bring back the markers and hopefully the modules to your actual county. And so what happened from there through discussion, we formed what we call the Remembrance Project. And it is a coalition of 50 organizations. 50 different organizations are identified under the Remembrance Project. I say this to tell you that if you want to do any type of change and change intentionally, you have to have a cause and a group of people with like minds. And this unity of the Remembrance Project has brought together more than just learning about our history. It has created a movement to show love, oneness, and unification within DeKalb County. When we first started out, we were only going to get the marker and the module, and we tried to find out where we were going to put it. We decided to put it in front of the DeKalb County Courthouse because the people who were the victims of lynching never got the opportunity to go to the courts. They never got the opportunity. So we have that lynching marker, one at the DeKalb County Courthouse. And in doing this project, other groups other areas wanted to take part in this initiative. And that's why we have another marker in North Druid at Oak Grove Park. And you guys can go and see all of these markers, and please make sure you go and visit them. And then we also have a marker at Kelly Park in Lithonia. I wanted to share this with you just to show you that even though we have a historical sketch that doesn't look so bright for Black people, I think there's actually power in what Black people bring to the table. And I think that it is time for all of us to recognize that we too have a part to play in being here in the United States. And with this, I wanted to make sure you know that we're continuing this journey, and you all are invited. It's a free event where we're going to shine the light on Close It. It's a dedication to the actual markers because we have not been able to do it like we had planned because of COVID. But we're going to do a virtual event, and you are all invited to be a part of this dedication. Where do we go from here? And I wanted to kind of give this perspective of where we go from here, because we're looking for freedom. And everybody has their own perspective of what freedom looks like. But these are just some do's that I want to share with you so that you can think about it as you're living your life. Take this as an opportunity of education, resources that can equip you for your life, and then to empower you to change intentionally. So what do we want to do? We want everyone to be a registered voter because people actually died for that right. We want you to actually, once you're registered, we want you to vote in every eligible election, not just the presidential. If anything you've learned from what we've seen over the last few years is local elections matter. That's where your power lies. Remember, we're waiting for federal government to do something, but we're also waiting for state to do something. And now, right now, you got the state and the federal actually going back and forth on things that they disagree on. But if you exercise your right to vote and vote in every election, it will change things. It will change the way things are being represented for you. Do join a civil rights organization that is fighting to maintain and advance civil and human rights. There's plenty of organizations, but of course, because I'm the NAACP, I invite all of you to join the NAACP DeKalb County Branch. Do become aware of and involved in local and national politics. A lot of people like to state that they don't get involved in politics, but your life is based on decisions from a political view. Your quality life, simple things like where you get your education from, what grocery store you're going to go to shop at, the job that you actually have or don't have. All of those things are done from the local and national political view. Advocate for adequate funding for public schools. Public schools provide the best education for everyone. And we're just a fan of making sure that it's funded accurately so that we can get the best education for all of our students at every level, from pre-K, elementary, middle school, high school, as well as college. And then the last thing I want to say is do save a portion of your income, because even in your savings, you don't want to become a slave to debt. You want to be able to be literally free with your financials as well as with your rights. your democracy, your just your quality of life. So in order to do that, you need to start doing a little saving to prepare to have no debt. Now, I'll go into questions. Before I go into questions, I just want to leave you with this. We all we got. We all we need. So all of us working together can make the change necessary in order for us to have the best life that we can possibly have. And just a few announcements of NAACP, just to give you a little some information. We meet every fourth Saturday virtually at 10 a.m. And you can see that information on our website. If you want to join, it's $30 a year. And then if you want to donate to the NAACP to help us with all the advocacy work that we're doing, we have a donate button on our website and also Cash App. We have a few announcements that we're trying to do in the community that we would like you to participate if you want to. We have our Women in NAACP Protecting Shoes to provide to our families in Africa. So we just ask if you want to participate those. We're collecting shoes every Thursday from 5 to 7. And then, of course, the water bill moratorium, we are a stakeholder in making sure that no one's water get turned off during the COVID season. So here's the options to avoid any disconnection. So if you don't have that information, wanted to share that with you. Also, we are having a promoting healthy living. Let's run COVID out of DeKalb County. We'll participate in a virtual run walk September 24th through the October the 3rd that you can participate in from anywhere. And then, of course, if you want to be at our dedication of the Remembrance Marker, you can do so by going to the website and register. And with that, I will now take questions.
Okay. Teresa, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I think I'm back on the video. We
Okay.
we had already one question in the chat. And thank you so much for coming and talking with us today. And we just really appreciate it. It was a wonderful presentation. I learned quite a lot. I just learned a lot. So myself, and I'm a historian, so I'm sure the students learned a great deal. So a couple of questions are coming in. The first one we got deals with the voting issue with the recent changes. And it says, my question has to deal with Stacey Abrams advocating for more Black voters. What bills were passed dealing with the so-called voter fraud? I had no idea that anyone said anything about there being more Black Georgia voters. So can you elaborate just a little bit on, I guess it's SB 202 we're talking about here.
Yeah. So SB 202. So what happened with SB 202 before it actually got passed? Now, here's the background to it. There was no voter fraud, but there was bills being created in our state legislators. Actually, it was over 100 bills being created from the Senate and House side as it relates to that. The reason why I put in the context of it disenfranchised Black people because it was Black people who made the difference in that last election. So that's where it came back. So now it's like people got together and decided, wait a minute, that was a lot of people who came out. Let us check to make sure that they literally are registered to vote. Are they really citizens of Georgia? Can they really vote in the area that they had? We had so many people that would get turned around because they were saying, you're not at the right precinct. You're not this, you're not that. And it was happening to Black and brown people. So that's the Black context of it. When you look at SB 202 and how it came to form, that's what made it not fair to the people or not fair to the Black people. Another reason why we felt like that it was disenfranchised on Black people is that Black people are the ones that don't have transportation and access to a whole lot of things. All right. They don't have access to, some people don't have ID. I didn't know this till I got into advocacy work. A lot of our seniors don't have it. They don't have their birth certificate to actually go get it. They have actually, it's just so many things. They don't have access to even get to where they need to go to actually get it. So having these type of accessibility things cause SB 202 to not be friendly to Black people. So I'm not sure what else part of the question.
Well, I think that's good. I just have maybe a follow-up a little bit, or maybe just a comment that you can maybe comment on maybe a little bit. But these measures that make it more difficult to vote, they'll mean that a small percentage of people might not be able to vote. But we are pretty much a very closely divided state in
Right.
which a small number of voters can swing an election pretty quickly. Is that your take on it too, Teresa? Or
Yeah, especially for what we saw in the last two elections, right? So one, Georgia is a Republican state. We know that, right? The numbers show it. The number of actual voters, and then the way the split is always. It doesn't matter whether you're Republican or Democrat. This is not about that for me. What we did see is once people were registered and exercised their right to vote, is that it changed the whole perspective of the state of Georgia, right? That's what happened. You got people out in that number, just like you said. It was a small amount of that number of from the election results actually switched things totally. I mean, this hasn't happened in a long time that you have two new senators, two brand new senators to be in the state of Georgia. That's never happened. So the fact that people actually came out and voted their will, their way, is what I'm looking at, not the fact of the party.
here's another question. Let's see. Do you believe the Election Integrity Act of 2021 is another attempt at Black voter suppression? Could you please explain how? I'm not one to watch the news, so I'm very curious. Thank you. I think you may have answered most of that. But anything you want to add to that, or
So what they call it? Election what?
election integrity? I think that's SB 202 is maybe also called the Election Integrity Act of 2021.
Oh, that's what they. Yeah. So I think I just answered that.
Yeah.
Talking about it from a Black perspective. Did she have a follow?
No, I don't think so. And here's another one. Were the last two elections a result of acts against voter suppression? I think actually what has happened is what Teresa was explaining is that more people voted, and so the next election there's an attempt to sort of whittle down the vote.
Yes,
I think that's it.
Right. So remember, we have been stagnant. Everybody's been stagnant, and then all of a sudden, the increase in not just registering people to vote, but people actually voted. And I think that's the difference between what happened when we got our Voters' Rights Act. We got people registered, but it wasn't about who was actually voting, because you still had the same people, the same type of results. But when we got people to participate in voting and actually getting out and voted early, remember, people took advantage of what has always been there. Absentee ballots has always been available. You could also vote early in the state of Georgia, you can. And then also you have the day of, where that's where it gets kind of shaky, because you got precinct changes that happen and people are not notified. So there's a lot of little things that are what I call systematic done that you don't see, but you see the results and you say, well, that wasn't voter suppression because people got out and voted. Well, if you did that and everybody got the opportunity to vote, why would you go and create another law that says, well, we need to make sure that you have this type of license or ID. You need to make sure that we cut off the number of days as it relates to when you can get your absentee ballot. We changed the whole absentee ballot form. You change everything and you think that's supposed to make it better. But if everything switched and everybody who registered went to vote, it was better. So what was the actual problem? So did we solve the problem? And I don't think so. I don't think we solve it with SB 202. We solve it by going to the polls and voting for people who represent you.
Here's another question sort of along the lines of the SB 202 regarding identification. And it says, what about people that don't have the legal right to vote because they aren't citizens or have had their rights taken? What about them taking advantage of the of provisions that that don't require them to have an ID? So I guess that was one of the arguments for passing SB 202. I mean, so that's the other argument, I guess, the other side.
Yeah, there's an argument. So there's an argument, but there's also some other things even lining up to that. So let's take for example, if you were a felon, I guess that's how people are looking at it. If you were a felon and you came back out and you've done your time, so you would not have the proper ID, but you don't know that, right? You don't know because the hype is let everybody get the right to vote. If you have done all your paperwork and all that, you can now go and vote. But if no one has told you that, hey, you really still can't go vote, whose fault is that? It's the systematic processes that we have in place. We could be like Florida and say, look, forget this. If you get out and you've done your time, you should be able to go and vote. You got to work. You got to pay bills. You got to pay taxes. So why shouldn't you be able to vote? See, it's some of those type of things that we don't think about that impacts us to this one little thing that I think that it gives us the most power, which is voting. Voting gives people power. And anytime you're trying to keep people from getting that power, I think that's suppression.
Now, here's another very interesting question, Teresa, and it regards also voting, but it says this. It says, is there a historical reason why Black voters mainly vote Democrat?
So. Well, I can give my perspective on that because I looked at both Black, because remember, I represent an organization that's nonpartisan. I kind of want to make sure we understand that. But at the same time, if you look at the views and what the Republican Party stands for, what the Democrat Party stands for, this is the way I look at it. Republicans look at money and they kind of say law and order and all that kind of thing, where with the Democratic process, it's more about all people, it's more inclusive. It gives you things, they're fighting for things that of quality of life that impacts us on our daily lives. So that's kind of how people kind of look at things. But, I wouldn't say that all Blacks just decide to do Democrats. I think if you look back at the history, Black people were voting Republican before all of this. So it's got to be about the issues. And I think that if we all get into a point to who is making, who's representing me, right, and representing the issues that can make my life better, I think that's the way people need to start looking at things.
And I can add a little bit onto this, not to get to being a long-winded historian, Teresa, I can go on about this, and I teach a lot of whole classes sort of about this. But if you go back to the 1860s, the Republican Party is the party of emancipation, and the party of African Americans really kind of up through the 1920s. But by the 1890s, very few Black people in the South are voting, and then there begins to be a shift in the Republican Party in the 1920s, and there's a shift in the Democratic Party too. There becomes a contest within the Democratic Party between conservative whites who don't like African Americans voting and more liberally minded whites who support the idea. And the 1930s roll around, and the New Deal, you begin to see a shift occur as President Roosevelt's policies, some of them are terribly flawed, but some reach out to African Americans. The labor movement gets going. And then really it's in the 1960s when the Democratic Party begins to embrace voting rights. I mean, all those, the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, those are all Democratic Party platforms. And so you start to see the more recent shift since the 1960s over civil rights, and whites who oppose that, not to stereotype too much the Republican Party, but many of them do go into the Republican Party. In my home state of Virginia, for example, you have a governor who's a segregationist governor, Mills Godwin, a Democrat, and then in the 60s, and then in the 1970s, he becomes a Republican and a conservative Republican. So it is a shift that occurs in the parties in our history, and it goes back and forth. And I think that's a good thing to think about, that, you know, look at who is protecting your interests, who is talking about the issues of interest to you. And I think that you see a shift occur there. Civil rights is the most recent one, I think. Okay, sorry, I got on. I said I wouldn't do that, and I just did it. Let's see. There were some questions about NAACP chapters that I wanted to get to. There was one about Clayton County. Is there a branch in Clayton County, or if a person lives in Clayton County, can they get involved in the DeKalb branch, or what do you say about that? These jurisdictional issues.
Yeah, so these are jurisdictional. The way we are set up is by county. But if you want to join, you can join any NAACP that you want to join. The only thing is, if you plan to run for office, you have to be in the area in which you within that jurisdiction. So yes, there is one for Clayton County. Senator Baldwin is the president there. We all work together because we share in on some of the same issues. I think most of the time we work together on voting issues together. So yes, there is.
And how about North Fulton area?
North Fulton just got chartered to become a NAACP unit. So they are new into this. They actually, I think, started out with 100 and something members. So we're really growing as it relates to trying to cover the whole state. I think we have representation out of the 159 counties. I think we have actively 90, but I think we have 130 that we could have.
In the state of Georgia.
In the state of Georgia.
Wow. Wow. I can remember, I write about the state of Alabama a lot. And, you know, back in the 20s and 30s, I think Mobile had just about the only active chapter at that time. And then, of course, it kind of grows a little bit in the 50s, but it's pretty interesting. That's amazing. You have so many chapters. And there was also a quick kind of another nuts and bolts question about the donations that you mentioned of, do you take clothes as well as shoes? Is there?
Our initiative is just shoes right now.
Okay.
There's another one that's taking clothes. I'm not sure, but it's not us. It's not NAACP, but there's another organization that's taking gently clothes.
Here's a really good question again about SB 202. Now that it's passed and it's preventing primarily Black people from voting, what is your suggestion of what we can do next? Meaning, how can we vote these officials out with laws that are preventing us to vote?
Yeah, so I've already been doing training on voting. One, to just educate people on what SB 202 is and what it does and how it impacts us. I don't study on SB 202 so much. I kind of just let you know where you need to go vote, when you need to go vote, and if you're going to use the absentee ballot process, that's the one you need to be really careful about, because that one really changed. You have a new form. They want it done a certain way. However, the instructions are on the absentee ballot. So whether you are going to vote absentee ballot or early or on the day of, vote. That's my biggest thing on that part. If you needed to know how the candidates line up, you should reach out to them.
I have my own question to sort of follow it up, though. On SB 202, in your opinion, what do you think is the most important part of that in terms of, like, will hit Black voters and older voters the most, do you think?
Well, I think the biggest thing for me personally is the fact that, one, that SB 202 was signed as soon as it was voted on. So that's a personal thing. But the impacts to the actual bill was the fact that you took the rights from the Secretary of State and put it into local government. The reason why I don't like that piece is because you're not winning because you got this idea, right, that Secretary of State leadership could actually change to Democrat, and it could. And the fact that that may be where the power lies, you've now given it to the local legislation, where the legislation is majority Republican Party. So it's kind of, even though you're saying it's independent, it's not independent, that you're going to bring it back to the legislators to make a decision on whether someone at a African American county, a majority, like a DeKalb County, like Savannah, the main counties that actually changed what happened in last one. I think it's just a hit to that. So let's change the outlook and give the power to the legislators. That don't make any sense to me because they're elected to, but that's the biggest part for me. I looked at the absentee ballot, the fact that you got to make copies of your ID. I think that is a slap in the face. That to me is just like poll tax, right? Now I got to figure out where I can go to make a copy. And then you make an assumption everybody got a phone and you make a copy and everybody got an email. So that's kind of it's kind of messed up in the way that that was brought up. So those are the things that concern me.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about too, particularly in certain urban areas of Atlanta. I know from teaching, internet connections are shaky. Access is really shaky, but then also interestingly in certain rural areas as well. So it's a problem that you see in both, with just access to technology, these types of issues that it seems like that could impact. I have another question, one of my own, and I guess this is something I'm interested in. Do you think that SB 202, all of this, could actually start backfire on the people who passed it? In other words, if the goal was to restrict voting, that it could, as much as anything, anger so many people that you have a bigger turnout. Do you think it could have that happen?
Yeah. So if you can recall that's basically what happened, right? If you think about absentee ballots, right? That was something that one party used more than the other, right? So when when everyone started to take advantage thanks to COVID, right? That's when you saw a shift, right? So now you got a shift on the main thing that you put together, because you put together, that party put together the absentee ballot process and procedure and the form, and now you think that that's what needed to be changed. Yes, it's going to backfire. It backfired on them this time, and it will backfire on them the next time. And the other thing that I think that is going to make the backfire is the way that they responded. Okay, let's say that we do have fraudulent things going on, or some type of no voter suppression. It's the attitude and the actual response to how you did the SB 202 that people are going to remember when they go back to the polls. It's how you respond.
It's interesting. Well, it's going to be very interesting. I wonder if we might switch just off to another topic a little bit, and talk about the Remembrance Project a little bit. Just how has the reaction been to that so far? What kind of feedback has the NAACP received? And I sort of wonder, you've had some ceremonies. I know we have a lot of it has been during COVID times, and that's hard. But what kind of feedback do you get when you go to the meetings of like the county commission and Lithonia as well? What kind of response?
So before we actually did anything in DeKalb County, we sat down with all the elected officials. So we got buy-in. So before we even said we are going to do this project, and EJI said that we could actually do this project, our first thing was we literally met with each county commissioner prior to it becoming a resolution. And then the resolution passed unanimously twice. So we had to do one to say, do we want this project to happen in DeKalb County? That was one. Okay, the second was, can we have this marker on that property? So that those two things had to be approved by the Board of Commissioners. We also met with the city of Decatur mayor and the city council, and they all were on board as well. We met with Lithonia. Even in the switch of the leadership, we still were able to get the same type of support. And then the North Druid, when we went through that project, we had to include City of Atlanta. So we've gotten approval from all the what I call the elected body, and then from the different communities. I think it's been an eye open for our Black community, but it's been, I think, more let me say, more of a dedication for white people to be involved. So we've had a lot of white people who engaged it to the heart, and I love that. But it's been for the Black community, it's kind of, okay, we're getting it. Oh my God, this really is here. Where is this? I didn't know about it. So we still got to work on how we get things to our community so that they are educated on what's going on and can have that opportunity to get involved. So all the way around, that's in DeKalb County, but we've also impacted other people. So I've met with, remember, LaGrange is the first one to get the marker, then DeKalb. So we have Fulton County is working on theirs, Fayette County is working on it, and Gwinnett is working on it. So I've met with all of those different counties to explain to them what we did and gave some recommendations for what they're doing. So it's working.
And I wonder, was how much was known about, two of the victims are unknown, they're anonymous today, but the other two men we have their names. Was there much known about them before you all began this process, or was it just, or did the act of doing your research, did that prompt people to look into their history and get their stories out?
Yeah. So we only knew what we knew from EJI about the two and what you could actually find, right? I think it was literally like a paragraph of each, right? Not even a paragraph, probably a couple of sentences. Um, Fortunately, we had the AJC who actually took it a whole nother level and did a little bit more research as it relates to Porter Turner. Because in his and finding out about it being in North Druid, that's how we found out about that one. Because most of the time, what we had looked at is most of the ones that we could track happened along the Redan corridor and the Lithonia, like Stone Mountain, Lithonia, which connected us to what? Stone Mountain Park. Okay, where the Ku Klux Klan. So all of this stuff was kind of coming out in the research and what we were finding out. The key thing that helped with doing this is the families of the Turner actually came out, wasn't even aware. They was not aware that he was lynched. They knew he died. And that's one of the key things that in our Black communities, we always, we don't talk about it. We would never say someone was lynched. We would say that they died, or we'll say they killed them, right? They killed them. We never say that someone was actually lynched. So now that we got all of the family involved, they kind of made this, more of a family history type thing. And now they know they can go to the marker and show their grandchildren and great, what I'm saying? So it's a little different to get the families involved. And now we've all become a big family as well.
I guess that's part of what I hear about when I read about this topic, is that sort of the silence is passed down from generation to generation. You have even the trauma can be passed down from generation to generation within families and then within communities. And it's the silence that is as bad as anything.
Right. And I think that's something that I think when we think about it from a Black community perspective, we've always kept silent because we've been told don't say nothing, right? Don't say anything. And the fact that we held it in, we've been told that we have anger issues. We may be overly this and overly that, but a lot of that this is why I talked about the fact that Black people have a culture. And I think it's time that people start to understand that Black people have a culture that needs to be taught and discussed, just as much as we talk about the Indian culture, the Native Indian culture, white culture, LGBT, all of this needs to be talked about. And what you will find that because Black people we have good culture, right? We have a foundation. We're faith people. We live by faith. We're family people. We believe in feasting. And then we're all a majority of us have some kind of art culturally, whether it's dance or that's the way we've expressed ourselves. So I think if we could actually get into what Black culture brings to the table, just like our other counterparts or other races, then I think we'll be a better people. You'll find that we have some of the same similarities. We want the same thing. I want a good house. I want a good family. I want, we just want the same thing. So all this divide, and that's why I said United States of America should be more united, and not just when we have tragedy, but we should literally start utilizing that name, United.
I know from my perspective as a historian, in my U.S. history classes, we spend, I mean, weeks really talking about Black culture, its formation as a major institution in American history. It's really so important to understand because American culture is so profoundly, the wider culture is so profoundly influenced by African American culture, by African culture that people preserved. It's
Right.
really fascinating to study. Okay, I'm getting another one. Let's see. Well, this is more of a. I think somebody sort of missed a little bit of the discussion of the markers. So there are three markers for four people that the NAACP is putting up around DeKalb County, the DeKalb, and also a little bit into Fulton and or the Atlanta area, and so that is sort of the context there. Now, I have one other question, Teresa. With regards to the Confederate monuments, that seemed to me like in the case of Decatur in particular, a very long process. Like
Mm-hmm.
it just went through these different phases, and you were wondering if they will ever be able to remove it. And I just wonder what was that process like to go through that, and can you just comment on that a little?
Yeah, it was a long process. And it was literally steered from people telling us that we could not do it. And I think that's a little something to even share with the students. Don't ever let somebody just tell you you can't do something. So it did take a long time. Again, there was more of a coordinated effort with the Beacon Hill group there. NAACP was there. I think it was, I forgot, Hate Free Decatur. A lot of different organizations actually came together on the initiative. And we did have a historian who did a lot of the history. We looked for places to put the Confederate monument. We asked the Daughters of Confederacy to actually take it back. They didn't want it. I mean, it was a lot to go through to kind of figure out how to remove it from the property when no one is taking ownership to the monument, right? So that's basically how that worked, and it was a great Juneteenth day to have that removed the night before we celebrated Juneteenth, and then after a year, we now we have Juneteenth as a holiday, and DeKalb County is actually leading in a lot of these changes. So
This is a question I sort of have as well. This is a good one regarding the Confederate monuments. Like, what should be done with them? What do you think, Teresa, should be done with these monuments now that they're removed from these public spaces? Should they be
okay,
put
so
in museums or?
yeah, you could anywhere you want to put them as long as they're in a private space. I think the key thing for me personally is I don't want my tax money being paid to upkeep Confederacy, which reminds me of what it really meant. It meant hate to me. That's what it means to me. So I'm not trying to erase anybody's history. I just said that I don't want to partake in with my money to upkeep signs of hate.
I know that in like some of the Eastern European countries, and even I think in the Soviet Union, or Russia, I should say, when communism fell, they had all these statues of Lenin and Stalin, various communist leaders, and they took them, they put them in parks and stuff, and they took them out of the public square. And it's an interesting question. I think it's a very interesting question. Well, I think that is all of our time, Teresa, and I just really appreciate you coming by and talking with our students. And I think we'll go ahead and conclude our event today, since we've kind of run out of time. And I'll just say to everybody, to the students, thank you for coming. Thank you for your questions. We will conclude our event.
All right. Thank y'all. Happy Constitution Week.
Yes. Thank you so much, Teresa. I so appreciate it.
All right. Have a great day.
I'm gonna call you real quick on the phone.
Okay.
After I clue us out, I'll let all the people they're leaving sort of now, and I'll sort of let them kind of. Right. And thanks to everybody for coming. We had upwards of 64 people at one point. So, which is a really good crowd. I think it's bigger than we could have gotten in the room at Decatur, and people from all over. So and for those, I see some people asking about attendance. I'm going to generate an attendance list, and I will forward that to your professors. So I will do that probably today, and probably get it out sometime this week or early next week. All right, Teresa, I'm going to call you. I'm going to go ahead and conclude the event.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much again.
All right.